Hello and welcome to the third instalment of our CMO discussion series as part of our report into the brand alignment gap, where we are exploring how to build brands in the world of AI and what that means for us. And today I am delighted to have a bit of a superstar of the CMO world here with Joe McClintock, regularly in all of the top 100 best marketer lists, which I'm always very jealous of. I was told I came 101st once.
Oh, did you?
No, but I'll try and blag that one at some point. But you've worked at a great array of brands, haven't you, over the years, from like Screwfix,
Yes.
Moonpig.com,
Yes.
Skyscanner, and now VP Brand and Marketing at Trainline.
Yep.
It'd be great if we just start off there, because that's such an interesting brand to look at from the outside. I mean, it's one of those brands that so many of us are daily users of, so you have that live experience of it. But it's one which I've always admired in a slightly nerdy way, that it's been on this sort of transition journey over the years as it's developed what the proposition is. But it's one which has always felt that it's been in lockstep, where the brand and the product and the experience all seem to be working together, which is a rarity with many of these things. So perhaps it'd be great if we could just start off with you telling us about the journey that you've been on with Trainline and how you've managed to wrangle the whole organisation to come along behind the vision of what it could be along the way.
Yeah. Thank you for the intro. So I think Trainline for me, like you say, is kind of a bit of a household name. And most people you ask when people go to me, what do you do? And I go, Trainline, that app. Oh yeah, I use that every day. So it's very familiar for many people. And I'm an avid user, as you know. I commute in from Norfolk. And I think one of the interesting things that I was brought in to do is really scale the brand into Europe, so take it into multiple countries. So we're predominantly a UK brand, but we've launched in Spain, France, Italy in particular. We also into what we call inbound, which is people coming over from the US or Canada or Japan for holidaying in Europe. So part of my job, big job, was to really scale that brand in Europe and make sure that people knew who we were, what the differentiation offer was around aggregation, at a time where the market was really fragmenting, and therefore an aggregator in rail was required effectively. So it's almost like what happened with airlines in the early 2000s. And Skyscanner came along. Well, that's happening with rail in Europe, and it happened with rail in the UK 20 years ago, and that's where we were founded. So all the way along, Trainline's been founded upon this idea that it takes complexity out of a fragmented, system, potentially, about buying tickets and the user experience of like barcodes and non-barcodes, etc. So we've always been there to try and simplify something that's quite tricky for people to navigate or get their head around and offer them, that best service. And I think one of the things that I recognized quite early on is when you've got such a great product already, and ultimately you've been the innovator in a category for a long time, I think there is always the danger that you can stop that innovation trail, or you can slow it down, and but there's potentially more and more you can do when it comes to creating customers value, as it were. So I really broke it down into two simple questions, which I use today, and actually I'll refer to in the business today, and they are what to put on a poster and where to point the money. And the simplicity of them is kind of the beauty of it. So the what to put on a poster is, what are we going to say? Okay, and why is anyone going to care? And where to point the money is like, well, once we figured that out, who's going to go buy it, and how are they going to find out about it, and etc. And I know as for marketers, you're probably going, well, yeah, it's quite obvious, right? But actually trying to orientate a business around those two questions and around solving for those two questions is the key, right? It's the real challenge to get people to be solving to, the one or two things you've chosen to put on the poster, and the one or two things you're betting on in terms of where to place the money. So always anchored everything in those two questions. And I think, when it comes to that first one around what you put on the poster, it's very depth understanding of your customer. And that is really about not only about why they churn, it's about their needs and wants, their switching propensities, their behaviors, and actually really getting some depth quantitatively and qualitatively as to what is going to move the needle. And then ultimately being able to play that into a sort of more of a commercial view, which is what, lots of commercial people call TAM, which is the total addressable market, and going, actually, of that total addressable market, based on that insight, what is truly available to us and what is out of our reach today because we don't have the proposition or the service or the access or the supply or whatever it is. So when you kind of can articulate that really well, it gets you to a place where you can get very pointed about what to put on the poster. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then I think the kind of the build up on that is like when you've got that absolute clarity of like, well, this is the problem we're trying to solve. This is the area we want to grow into as a business. Then it makes it really simple because you're all aiming for the same thing and in the same customer problem space and the same opportunity space. So when it comes to product and marketing teams being in lockstep, or UX teams and engineering teams, you have the same set of customer problems. You have the same set of commercial opportunities that you're all racing after. Mm-hmm. And then you have your respective expertise. So for my team, our role will be to help our teams dream and imagine like where could we be or what could we be for these customers in this problem space. And then the product teams kind of like take some of that and they go, well, actually, the jobs to be done are this. This is what we could be. Now, what could we build? What could we make? What experiences could we create? And does that, answer differentiation? Does it answer the customer need? Does it answer the addressable market opportunity? And when you get that thinking together and that teamwork on that problem, you start to build a plan that actually lines up beautifully.
But I guess in its simplest sense, Trainline at its core is a means to book trains.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's an aggregator of all of the options which are available to you. And you could end up in a world where you are being like a go compare or a compare the market and going, all right, there's one functional thing that we do. And brand's job is just to do the jazz hands over the top of it to go, remember us, please use us. But it feels like it's a different beast where everyone's on a journey to consistently change what the product proposition is and expands that out. And is that something which was in the DNA of the organization that they're trying to do this? Or is it something which is done strategically because you're worried that someone else could come in tomorrow and have a very similar proposition with a different coloured in advertising that could do the same thing?
It's definitely the DNA. So if I think about, again, I mean, it's classic, right? Why every brand was founded on solving a problem, etc. Well, when Trainline came about, it was around, well, actually, it's quite tricky to buy train tickets. Digital was kind of a thing. I mean, God, it feels weird saying that. And actually, just felt like, you had this technology and you had a complex ecosystem, and the technology could make that better, right? And help customers, buy tickets, journey easier, and all of that. So it is in our DNA. So if you think about digital ticketing, things like Split Save, those have all been innovations, and we continue and always keep delivering innovation. So last year we delivered a huge set of innovation around journey management, disruption management. That's a real customer need. And so for us, it's been the DNA, and I think it won't ever not be, because ultimately we're always looking for what is the thing that's going to make this better for customers. It's going to actually drive us forward. It's going to improve the category or evolve the category, because technology will evolve as well, right? And at some point, if you don't either embrace the technology or continue to solve customer problems, someone else probably will, or something else will come along that's different. So you're always being challenged somewhat, not just from a traditional competitor perspective, but actually the technology and customer demands effectively.
Yes. But it feels quite rare that, particularly when you get very innovative companies who've got brilliant engineers and brilliant product minds who are just ferreting away going, I can make cool stuff, that you can often end up with organizations which have got lots of little side shoot products and functions and everything else. It sort of feels quite rare to have everyone beholden to a direction and a bigger story which keeps things together. And is there something in the way in which you are working, or the way in which the organization operates, that they are willing to be led by a fundamental brand positioning and a stance which you're taking, and then make all the product follow that, versus everything sort of happening and then brand trying to do something which wraps up all of the madness that's happening around it?
I think it comes down to two things. I would say one is the insight, the customer insight. I mean, we all want to genuinely, every team wants to hear and engage with that. So, and my team generate a significant amount of that. Probably, I would say 70% of that actually really defines proposition development. So there's kind of that core element. But I think I guess like sometimes people just need help imagining and actually showing them possibility. And it doesn't mean that like of the 20 ideas that we might come up with, all the 20 possibilities that we might come up with, that every single one of them is one you go after. You might just go after one or two, because actually that was the one that really struck a chord. It really answered the insight. It really delivered on the commercial objectives. And I just see it as our responsibility to bring possibility to the table, whatever happens. Like there's always, openness and time and options for other ways of looking at a problem space. And I think that's that's a culture in my team that I really try and foster, is actually don't, rest on the laurels, bring ideas to the table, push the thinking, bring big thinking. They can say no, it's absolutely fine. But if we're not doing that, I don't think we're doing our job, if that makes sense. I think our job is to do exactly that, not just take, hey, let's take this product, wrap it up lovely, put it out into a marketing campaign. It's going, oh, this is the problem space. These are the possibilities. You're building that, great. But actually, have you thought about it like this? Or could we look at it like this? And actually then it becomes a collaboration about possibilities that answer both the customer need and also push the brand ahead.
It's such a fabulous spot to be within organisation as, I guess, a protagonist, as you've spoken about before, where marketing and brand's role within that is actually putting all of that fresh thinking, all of that possibility based on the customer insight into what the experience could be, or what the product development could be, or whatever it is, and using creativity to build out that totality of the experience. I mean, are there things that have happened over the time that your team have come up with that have been realized into product or experience that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, there's been things also we've done or come up with that have never gone into anything, but actually, people remember them as well, and then they come back to them sometimes. But and that's kind of my point around being that, taking on that role. And you might share 20 ideas and you only have to go after one. But so one was last year. God, actually, it must have been about 18 months ago now. We were going through a strategy process and we were talking about customer problem spaces. And one of our C-suite was talking about where we've achieved great success, and he used this phrase, which I thought was brilliant. It was around discontinuity,
right?
And so discontinuity around kind of actually when like aggregation happens in Europe, there's a kind of moment of like, this isn't the same, it's different. I don't know how to think about this. Enter an aggregator, right? Or in the case of what happened, where is this discontinuity in rail in the UK? Because obviously people are quite used to aggregation in the UK. It's around disruptions and like when things go wrong, what do you do? How do you manage it? All of this. And we are always sitting on a gold mine of data, right? So we've got, huge amounts of data across all the different services around the UK in terms of what's happening. Is it on time, not on time? Using industry data, using our own AI enabled data using our predictive models around the industry data and what have you. And we were like, well, we've got a customer problem. It's not being fulfilled. We have this data, and actually what could we do with it? So we actually came up with a creative idea, which meant that we took a number of different solutions and wrapped it all up into a bit of a bow and gone, well, aren't we this for people? Aren't we this kind of taking on this kind of heroic role of giving them information, solutions, helping them with, refunds in times of discontinuity? So that insight then led to a piece of work, which was kind of like, this is the role we could play for people. And actually the product and design team, like, right, okay, how do I design against that? How do I build product thinking against that? And then there was a bit of a two-way discussion around, what of all of these things would actually drive behavior change, and is it 2 or 3 things? Is it 4 or 5 things? Is it this thing? Is it? And we went through a huge sort of discovery process. And then ultimately we came with like, these are our features and our experiences. This is the kind of way we think about ourselves and our role. And then we went on a journey which led to a campaign last December called the campaign was called The Way to Train. It was our new brand platform as well. And we launched a number of services off the back of that, and actually, really landed the fact that it's not just about booking tickets. We've also got all these other things for you. So, and that process was very two-way between sort of product design and marketing, but also engineering as well. So an engineering teams were really excited about it. We set out a timeline, we built to that timeline, and we launched on the day we said we were going to launch these set of services under this really big idea, which is really fun. And we're iterating and evolving on that now. So
it's amazing the number of people who I know have experienced that now firsthand.
Yes.
I was literally talking with Claire, our CEO, about this from our last trip back from Oxford, and it's remarkably useful when it's something that's pinging up and telling you of all these things that are going wrong and what you can actually do with it. And I think that sort of thing I find very intriguing about adopting a defensible brand position, particularly in the world of AI now, that if I am to ask whatever bot that I'm going to be playing with that particular day, I need to book train tickets. How should I do it? Why should I do it? That it suddenly becomes quite interesting that Trainline will be then sending a signal through that where going, well, there's a good reason you should book through Trainline, even though you might be paying fees on top of this, because they will really help you through this. If things go wrong, they will guide you in a different direction. And it suddenly feels like it's a tangible, cohesive signal, which gives a defensible proof of why Trainline is different, which suddenly people are starting to experience in the real world.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, how much are you now thinking about the brand and how it is discovered in new ways and talked about in ways that might be reflected through the summation that an LLM might give for the brand now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, our SEO team is massively all over that. And we don't call them SEO anymore, like ultimately.
They've got all of the letters in front of their names now.
And, they're very much like, how do we like show up in all the right platforms in all the right ways? And obviously, again, when you think about some of the platforms, like, I mean, I'm a massive lover of Claude. If you ask them where to buy a train ticket, what's Trainline about, you'll get lots of answers. You'll get stuff that's kind of pretty negative, pretty positive. Reddit's suddenly become a lot more important than it was before, and then ultimately, but that's I think that's just again the evolution of digital platforms. And I think Google's evolved. SEOs with Google has evolved. Paid with Google has evolved. YouTube's massive. So I think as different technology comes on board, whether it be AI or in the last, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, however many years, digital marketing, I just see AI as just another step change.
Yeah.
Accelerated, an amazing tool. And actually we've just got to make sure that if you answer customer problems that keep you ahead of either building things they don't know they need, the customers don't know that they need yet, or just solving it better than anyone else, it all kind of catches up with itself anyway. Now, there's always a challenge around some of these different platforms around, is it going to impact different travel platforms in terms of disintermediate, that kind of stuff. That's been a discussion for many years. Like Google had Google Flights, Google Trains, Google Hotels. But actually, I think, the challenge is like with Google in those those kind of circumstances, we're the end-to-end expert of everything, if that makes sense, from booking a train ticket and finding the right thing to helping you on the journey, discovering that there's a really cool map feature that you can track your train on. I don't know if you found that yet. That's very cool. And
I will look for that one.
Yeah, have a look at that one. Or resolving things when things go wrong. So I think all these digital platforms, you have to lean in. You have to find your place and space with them. Use them to your advantage because they're brilliant. But also, I think it just challenges you continuously to do better for customers and create better products and better services so they choose you more. So,
I mean, it's so interesting that you've almost naturally fallen into a space where you are definitively the answer to the questions that people are going to be answering, and everything about your product suite and the brand is about, well, that's what we do. So it's almost like you're very well positioned in this new space to be constantly referenced as, well, if you
Yes.
need to sort that out, Trainline are the ones. And it suddenly becomes very intriguing to have that built into the DNA of what you're actually trying to do. Now, I know you've had a lot of success with Trainline, but you've been in lots of other organizations along the way. Did you manage to wrangle the organizations in the same way in those places to be able to get to the same sort of fundamental, all wrapped up together answer? Or has it been a bit of a journey of challenges and difficulties of trying to make those things happen?
I mean, when I was at Screwfix, that was a very long time ago.
Yes.
So I think I was in my like early 20s. So I mean, that was like 20 years ago. But way back
Is this
then,
back in the catalogue days of
they still have a
Screwfix?
catalogue, but
I love a Screwfix
I know,
catalogue.
I know. They don't do them anymore. Actually.
Sadness.
But what was brilliant about that business, and I still love that business so much, is it actually started in somebody's shed, and it started as a telephone business where you ring up and you order your products and services, a catalogue, you order the products and services. And so then it developed a great database of customers and insight and what people are buying, where they were buying, etc. And then obviously that enabled them to build out a range and then scale, and then ultimately it became online, and then long term it's become stores as well, right? So the kind of the expansion of that business has been amazing to watch, and I feel really proud of my time there. And it taught me a huge amount about customer-led thinking. I was really lucky. I worked for the CEO on some big projects. I kind of on one of these kind of schemes where you get chucked into different scenarios, and he chucked me into customer marketing, and basically, here's our database, figure out who to send a catalog to, figure out where category extensions could live, figure out where the value is. And I mean, I was sitting there going, what on earth are you talking about? I've got no idea how to do this. And I figured it out with some coaching, obviously, along the way. And I think then when I've taken it into other businesses, like let's take Moonpig, for example, again, going in there with starting with the customer, where's the value today in terms of what who's buying what from you and to what extent, and where is the market opportunity, and that's that TAM I was talking about for Trainline. And then actually going, okay, what do you got permission to do? What are the possibilities? I just always start there. And actually, I think that's a formula that works, because actually if you start with the customer and you start with the value around the customer and how to get to the value in a way that's going to make them happy and feel like it's a great experience, they'll come back again and again. You're kind of on to me, it's like a winning streak, because ultimately the product needs to answer to that. The brand needs to answer to that. The supply chain needs to answer to that, because that's what ultimately you're all trying to do. So having a really clear articulation on the customer and where the value is, what you're getting and not getting, and why, and then building teams around that problem space just drives cohesion. Because it's not about being a brand-led business or a product-led business. It's not being about design, or it's not about somebody trying to, I don't know, hog the limelight, or it's all about this. Because then it's just about the customer, which is the most important, person in this, right? They're the ones that, generate all your sales and all your revenue. So without them, and without the idea of creating continuous customer value, you don't get to grow. So that's how I think about it.
I love that, because it's such an undeniable truth for everyone to have to answer against.
Yeah.
Because you can get so many organizations where, you can be so business centric as the leadership team, where you're going, actually, this is what I'm trying to achieve, or this is what I need to give back to shareholders. Or you can have employees across the organization who are thinking about their own siloed roles, and product proposition people are just trying to make it for that. And then brand and marketing going over doing some fancy stuff for a certain audience. But it's trying to find that one truth that the whole organization can agree to and then focus on, which then helps make all decisions cohesive and correct and all going in the same direction.
It's critical thinking at the end of the day, isn't it? It's just unpacking the why on everything. Like in any of those examples, you're like, why am I doing this? What is underneath it? What's driving it? And then at the end of it, I pretty much guarantee there'll be some link to the customer, even if it's about, I don't know, creating more shareholder value. Well, the way you create more shareholder value is you create more customer value ultimately, because that's going to drive your performance, and it's going to enable you to drive forward, that will ultimately create more shareholder value. So I just genuinely think kind of all roads lead there, if that makes sense, that how generating customer value is kind of the place to start every time.
And how do you get that through the organization just practically as a person? Because there's many spaces and organizations that I have seen where there's some really great thinking about the customer and the product, but it still feels quite separate from everyone else. And you can then go and speak to employees across the wider frame, or if you're in an organization like Screwfix, which I presume has got lots of staff on the front line who are all busy doing their day jobs, how do you communicate through to them what the brand imperative is and the truth of the customer and the singular differential thing that we're trying to be? Is it you running around and jazz handing in front of these people, or is it trying to convince the CEO to communicate it down? What is the methodology of making everyone aligned?
God, do you know what? It's hard to even articulate one recipe. I genuinely, I think people have come at things through different lenses. They have different biases, and ultimately, I think I'm sure everyone has got their own stakeholder mapping exercise. But one of my mentors taught me this really good stakeholder mapping exercise, which is kind of concentric circles, and it actually is this idea of like closeness. And I think it's actually around Dunbar's number, which is some famous scientist.
Is this the Kevin Bacon problem, that you can list any film on IMDb and Kevin Bacon will be 2 steps removed from any person in any film?
Not quite. But actually Instagram's algorithm is built off of Dunbar's number. Apparently someone told me, I could be wrong, but someone who worked at Instagram told me. But Dunbar's number is kind of like this idea of closeness, that effectively in your life you have like 5, 15, 150.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
So 150, the person in the 150 bucket was like, I don't know, saw him in a pub. And like, oh, how's it going? You could have maybe a quick chat, maybe a beer, and it's an acquaintance of some kind.
Yeah.
I don't know. The 50 is like perhaps somebody you work with, like who, you are in regular contact with, but actually you're not going to be telling them your life story or your woes or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Your 15 are like your family and your best mates. You might be on holiday with them. I don't know. You'll definitely go out for dinner. And then your 5 is your next of kin, effectively. Yeah. And if you map your stakeholders like that, and you kind of look at like, well, who do I need to believe in this idea? And like, where do they sit on this kind of, 5, 15, 50, 150? What do they want to know? Why do they care? And you see, at least get a bit of a picture or a lay of the land. And then you've kind of like, you've got the context. So what is the business context? What is their context? And then ultimately it's like, there's a timing aspect. It's like when do they or could they or want to listen to this point of view? And you just kind of build it over time. It's like, it's definitely not big jazz hand events. It might have that along the way, but it's largely about, building information and insight and, idea exchange, and then just constantly building on it. And like over time it happens, but it does take time, genuinely does take a bit of like, sometimes a bit of inspiration and sometimes a bit of reinforcing through data, sometimes a bit of challenge, sometimes a bit of knockback. All of those things just build and build and build. And I think it's just, if you're pretty single-minded about, I want to get the business to build towards something, you can scare people when you kind of go, we're going to go and build to this thing over here. And they're like, why? I don't understand. Like, so some people might be engaged in that and go, yeah, I love that idea. I really want to build towards it. Some people are like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just like, so you have to really think about that stakeholder map and go, what is it about that person or that team or whatever that's really going to get them, going and really excited about a possibility. And that's I think that is really different depending on the problem space. It's almost like the only consistent thing I would say is that stakeholder mapping and really understanding your internal audience, and then finding the ways and getting your timing right to land all of the pieces.
Absolutely. Now, I suppose you'd still, within all of that, need the consistency of story being told. So even when you're finding different ways to engage people with, that at least there's a sense of the consistent thread of what we're ultimately all trying to go towards.
Yeah. Which is why I use the what to put on a poster, where to point the money.
Yes.
Because it's kind of, transcends different teams because it's quite simple. And then you're like, what to put on the poster? What do I mean by that? Well, it means like, what am I going to say? Okay, well, how do I figure out what I mean? And you unpack it, and then people kind of understand what you're saying. And today we're going to talk about this bit, or we're going to talk about that bit. That's a framework that really helps transcend teams, disciplines, to really try and get them, oh, we're here to talk about that.
I mean, it's very much its marketing principles of being able to just go, this is the singularity of the thing which is going to be sticky in people's minds.
Yeah.
And then we find lots of different ways to consistently land that same point. But humans inside a business are the same as humans outside the business. And you've got to be able to achieve that in some way.
We do get caught up in a bit, sometimes in marketing, you can get up a bit caught up in yourself and your own sort of language and your own kind of words. And I always try and encourage the team to change their language to suit the person or the situation, because they're not going to understand it, or it's a new piece of marketing language which is probably going to either put them off or go, I don't get it, or they're just going to disengage. So I think always thinking about how does that transfer to that stakeholder need or understanding is vital in how you land a message.
I so buy into that, because it's almost the temptation in marketing land is you boil everything down into a pithy set of adjectives in a slightly complex framework that marketing minds know how to interpret. But being able to tell a story of what you are, because a story has always got a plot line, a hero character, a destination, but you can tell a story in 100 different ways, but people still get it, and they can also reinterpret it in their own ways.
Absolutely, yeah.
And trying to get stuff into people's minds in that way is like, provided they've got the story arc, they can then work through 100%. What that means for them, rather than being human, innovative, futuristic, whatever it might be.
Yeah, because it becomes really complicated, and you just lose the room.
It does. Another thing which I'm very interested about your approach, particularly with Trainline, is that you're an innovative business and you split your budgets with a 20% pot for constantly experimenting with new approaches, new channels.
Yeah.
Okay, which is a principle which I've seen in a few places before. How does this come about, and how do you keep wrangling the possibilities that come from that whilst keeping the sense of coherence of the overall mission of what you're trying to do?
Again, I think it's that it comes down to that question of what to put on the poster, where to point the money, right? Because like I said, the world is completely changing from a tools, technology, media, formats, everything is like constantly changing. And unless you are experimenting, you're going to likely fall behind. So for me, experimentation, whether it's 10%, 20%, 30%, 50%, who knows, right? Depending on what your strategy is, what your need is, it's a vital part of any execution. And you can do pre-testing, of course, you can do all of the research or any of the kind of different methodologies that are out there. But actually, depending upon your hypotheses, you're upon prove or disprove, you need some way of like checking yourself and pushing yourself, going, have I got this right? Could I do it differently? And I think that's just the modern marketing need, really. And so for me, saying to the business, hey, this is the spend, this is what you're going to get back from it. But actually, like, I think that, potentially in the future, we can create an extra X% efficiency, or, there are these new channels. I'm not really sure how to think about them. Or actually, I think potentially my hypothesis is moving some here to here is going to actually deliver better ROI. It's not unlikely the business is going to say, no, don't do that, right? And in most cases are going to go, okay, great, like, go find out. It might be wrong, which is fine also. But actually, if you start with a hypothesis and you've got a good sense of some insights have told me try X, Y, Z, or I'm thinking ABC, you kind of not usually, got it out of thin air. You've got some reason as to why you're doing it. I think you're probably going to convince people quite easily that actually it's worthwhile doing. And it's just, to me, it should be standard practice of anything we do. And again, it's just really trying to sort of do that critical thinking on what could we do better, that continuous improvement in where you invest and how you invest.
Lovely. And as a final question about almost the external realization of the brand and how it comes to pass in the media world, it's a very fragmented space now. And with so many of the platforms which our brands are turning up on, they've all got very specific behaviors and specific methodologies which they know work best for that particular platform, which in some ways creates a world of specialists who are very good at optimizing brands to work for Meta or in the influencer channel or whatever else. But at the same time, do you also get the sense that brands are therefore becoming beholden to what the media owners want them to be, as opposed to what you want the brand to be? And therefore you end up being quite a fragmented beast in the way in which you come across in media. I mean, how is the media world from your perspective?
There's a lot of things to consider, right? So there are different platforms, formats. I mean, God, the list goes on, right? And I think, you'll meet with brilliant minds from media agencies, media platforms who'll talk to you about all the new things out there or what's happening with your spend, etc., or whatever. And those are really great inputs and those are really great insights. And, ultimately some of that stuff has proven to be super fruitful for us. I think what's really important is that you have as a business a way of measuring, thinking about all of this stuff that feels true to your data and true to your insight in terms of how you can capture it and how you can really assess whether it was the right thing to do versus something else. You have a sort of rigorous testing framework and roadmap or learning agenda to go, is this right or not right? And then as these things come along, you can kind of go, well, does this fit the learning agenda? Yes, no. Should something in the learning agenda be switched out for it? And I think you just iteratively get to a better execution. I think through that iteratively getting to a better execution, clearly you're going to have to make sure that what goes out is the best reflection of who you are and what you want to be and what you want to convey. And that's about, again, really good objectives, really good tracking on those objectives. But I mean, ultimately, if you take some of the meta platforms, even with AI now, like in terms of how many more assets you can put out on those platforms, it's pretty incredible. Like, because they'll find with an asset the right person and the ROI will go up. So I think it's just about finding a way to lean into the fact that it is fragmented and that's okay. And there's lots of offerings out there, but actually finding the things that do work. So again, great data, great sort of, what's the word? Flywheels of information coming back in, and then testing frameworks, learning agendas to then be able to make sure that you can figure out what's the right thing, where to point the money.
Always. And how about as a final question, and this one's could be tricky, I don't know, but how do you justify your worth in what you're doing back to the business? When I totally get it when it's going, we are buying in a traditional sense from marketing, I'm buying this media and I've got this return and I've optimized it this way and it's more efficient and everything else. But you seem to put a lot of your effort into helping develop the product and the experience and the new opportunities which might come from that. How do you quantify the value that you are contributing back to the business? Are you judged by just the pure marketing part of it, which might only be 25% of your actual effort, or are you wrapped up into the bigger discussions as to how you're just building the business as a whole?
I think it's changed over time. So I think I would say 5 years ago at Trainline, it would have been about delivering certain OKRs, performance OKRs. And obviously within when you unpack some of those performance OKRs, you get to the points around, well, this could be better if we had a offer proposition or a customer thing that did this or a brand that did this. So actually, in a way, the way where I've landed in terms of sort of helping the business think about the proposition and what you take to customers and how you can push the thinking has always been about better ROI, ultimately, because it's
the fundamental ROI of the business.
It's unpacking everything. And I think as I've done that over time and shown how these aspects can improve the ROI, then you get more permission and you get asked more to do more of that stuff. So if I think about where my goals were 5 years ago to where they are now, one of my 4 goals in a year is around marketing spend ROI. The 3 others aren't. So actually, one of them's around big thinking and actually addressing some specific pain points on the big thinking. So I think it's just, again, talking back to the simplicity of it. If you want to get customers to do something, if you want to bring sort of value to the business, you've got to bring value to customers. And then ultimately it falls back to you in terms of performance and better retention, better ROI on your spend, etc. So it all is so well and interconnected. And I think it's just always about unpacking what you're doing and why and what the drivers of that are. And then just showing and proving how those drivers really come together. And some of it's easy to prove, some of it isn't easy to prove. But I think with enough large analysis, enough kind of insight, you can show the drivers of things. So for example, let's take a brand tracker, right? Drivers of consideration, top 5 drivers of consideration are ABC, right? And actually those drivers of consideration are, different statements. There might be one around price, there might be one around ease. Same for churn drivers, you'll have that as well, right? And you'll know how much churn is impacting your business. So you'll have an understanding there of the qualitative and quantitative side of the problem. Then you can look at that problem and say, well, what will drive switching propensity, or what will drive churn reduction? Well, you start to come up with product and service ideas and brand ideas. And then then it just falls into that what to put on a poster process, right? So I think you can still unpack everything back as long as you just keep kind of trying to unpack it and trying to get to some of the granularity. And there is a level of acceptance that, no measurement's perfect, but I think you just have to go in and say, look, we could spend X amount of money testing this and understanding this, or we could make this bet, and it's a trade-off discussion then. So
it's so enlightening just to be able to go, the answer to this one may not be comms first. It might well be fix the product or fix this part of the experience and then advertise that part of it. And then that's the ultimate solution to it, which is a far more fundamental approach to building the proposition out.
Yeah, totally. And I think also in that instance, because obviously there's a cost to doing that, right? And I think it might be that the cost of building like something within the product or the user experience, or plugging in some supply in our case, is we're not able to do it. So actually it's fine to do it with marketing for now, in terms of driving the growth, the retention, but actually at some point the cost benefit analysis is going to come into question. So I think, again, it's a trade-off discussion. How do you trade off your available resource to build products and services, your ability to get suppliers to do what you want them to do in terms of helping you build out that product and service, versus actually what marketing can turn on tomorrow or in 3 months? And again, it's like optionality, really, that conversation. So
thank you. That was brilliant. So much insight in that. That's wonderful. And I generally hope you don't have to use any of your delivery pay or alternative routes on your trip home tonight.
Thank you.
But that's been so useful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.